Welcome to the old Monty and a Cup of Joe podcast. Monty, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Joe. Great to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well.
All right.
Cool,
Well,
man.
sounds
You want to
good.
go into South Carolina?
Oh, yeah, we may as well. So South Carolina, they're struggling a little bit. They came out under Beamer and had two surprising seasons there off the bat. You had the Mayo Bowl, and they went and won that. And a lot of people that don't follow South Carolina closely don't remember or don't know that I think they used about 19 quarterbacks in that season just to make it to that Mayo Bowl, that Duke's Mayo Bowl game in Charlotte that they won against UNC. But at one point in that season, our quarterback situation was such that we had a graduate assistant, Zeb Noland, and we had to bring Zeb off the bench as a GA and put him in uniform to play quarterback just to get us through that season. Um,
Yeah, I
so
remember hearing about that.
yeah, so it was tough. We lost our quarterback the first game of the year. We lost a couple other quarterbacks here and there. We wound up with Zeb coming in and playing, and then we went to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and DeCarian Joyner, who's just absolutely been a godsend for South Carolina, came in and quarterbacked us to a win there in that bowl game, and we started off the next year rough. Not really what you would consider stellar by any means. Wound up blowing some games that we should have won, and then somehow we turned on some magic there at the end of the year, and we hung 63 on a pretty good Tennessee team and went to Death Valley and pulled off a victory against Clemson in Death Valley. We made it to the bowl game there against Notre Dame, which didn't go as expected. But all things considered, that was a good season for the Gamecocks. Last year, things kind of started to slide off the rails a little bit more. And where that started ultimately and where it still is right now is with the offensive line. And if you don't have an offensive line, not just to be an SEC homer here, because you need an offensive line at any level of football, but if you don't have an offensive line in the SEC, you're in trouble, because when you start lining up against LSU and Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Tennessee and Auburn and whoever else you want to add to the list, and then you throw Clemson in there at the end of the year as one of your non-con games, brother, you better have some beef up there on the offensive line. That's one thing K-State talks about. They've got the NIL up there at K-State for the beef for the offensive line. And those big boys up there at K-State that they've had in the past, those guys have really made those teams. And that's one thing right now that South Carolina is really lacking and really hurting at. It's not that we don't have any offensive line. It's that we don't have a lot of depth at offensive line.
And weren't
So
there
if
a bunch
we,
of injuries last year, too?
yes, a ton. And that's one thing we're hoping for this year is just please keep that offensive line healthy, please. We had Rattler last year. I don't know what our record would have been if Spencer Rattler weren't back there. All things said, Spencer Rattler, some people think he's great. Some people think he's the worst quarterback ever. I've seen him play and watched him play. I think he's pretty darn good. And I think the New Orleans Saints think that he's pretty darn good. Having
Yeah.
said that, if we didn't have Spencer Rattler in the backfield last year, you might have been looking at a 3-win team because our offensive line was porous,
Hmm.
to say the least. We've got Sean Elliott, who was our offensive line coach when Spurrier was here, and he was the interim head coach after Spurrier retired mid-season, and then Sean Elliott went off to Georgia State University, and a lot of Gamecock fans felt like he should have been the head coach, myself being one of them. And I will not retract that statement, and I will not go back on it, because I can promise you I would have 10 times have rather had Sean Elliott as head coach than Will Muschamp. That's a story that I won't even get started on, because I don't even honestly like saying his name. But regardless to say, I'm obviously glad that he's gone. from the university. And I'm glad to have Shane Beamer. I love Shane Beamer. I'm so excited that Sean Elliott has come back to Columbia from Georgia State. He's left his head coaching job at Georgia State, and he's come back here to be the tight ends coach. And he's also got his hands in the offensive line, which is nothing but a positive for South Carolina. Sean Elliott is one of those guys that will get down and crawl through glass. He's like I can't remember his name, but the defensive, not the Detroit Lions coach. He wants to go out and bite kneecaps and attack people. That's Sean Elliott. That's what Sean Elliott brings to the game, and I'm really hoping he's helped bring some of that aggressiveness back to our offensive line. And it can't be anything but a positive for South Carolina having Sean Elliott there. But Sean Elliott wears a headset and a golf shirt, and he doesn't wear pads or a helmet. He's not going to be on the field. Those guys on the field have to do the job, and that's going to be a concern for South Carolina, is keeping those guys out there healthy. We've got some good options at quarterback. We've got Lenoris Sellers, who is just an absolute beast. This guy is just insane. He's 6'4", 235, 240, and he is fast. He's not 6'4", 240 and heavy. You know, this isn't Jared Lorenzen. This isn't the round mound of touchdown. This isn't the Pillsbury throw boy. Lenoris Sellers is 6'3", 6'4", 235, 240. He is muscle and he is fast. Now, he has only played a few snaps. So you can't really take those stats that he's generated for much because the sample size is so small. But what he's done, if you just go back and look at the few clips of him that are out there, are outrageous. He can run, he can throw, he's hard to bring down. It almost kind of Cam Newton-ish in a way. And the backup to him is a guy named Robbie Ashford, who's 6'2", 230. He's quick, strong. He can throw the ball from here to Birmingham if he wanted to. He's another guy with a big arm, big, strong guy. Another positive that we've got is out there on wide receiver. We got a guy named Nichols Harbor, and I don't know if you've heard his name or not. He came to South Carolina. Let me see if I can find his bio here. His final two choices were Oregon and South Carolina, and the reason was because of track. Because Nichols Harbor at heart is a track athlete. He barely missed the cut for the Olympics this year, and they suspect that in 4 years he will be on the Olympic team. Let me see. I'm trying to find his. I got so many pages open up here. Anyway, Nichols Harbor. He's a threat at wide receiver. Anytime he's on the field, you've got to cover him. You've got to account for him.
He's got to be an athlete if he's running track, and Oregon wanted him.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's why Oregon wanted him, was for track. But a note about Nichols Harbor is the EA Sports college football game that just came out, NCAA 2024. If you get on there and look, Nichols Harbor is the fastest player on the game.
Oh really?
Yeah, he is a cheat code. That's what they call him, is cheat code. He is a cheat code. He is that fast. So he is ridiculous, blazing speed. He is tall. He's long. He's rangy. I mean, he's just a threat. Anytime he's on the field running out there for a pass, you've got to account for him. We got a couple of good options at running back. We're pretty deep there. Our biggest issue, like I said, is going to be the offensive line. If there is a strong point to this Gamecock team right now, it's the defense. We've got a little bit of defense left over to build up for. Last year, I think in our last 4 games, we allowed 3 touchdowns. I believe that's correct. Or it was 3 games and 4 touchdowns, or 4 games and 3 touchdowns, one of the two. Against Clemson, who beat us, we held Clemson to no offensive touchdowns. They didn't score a touchdown on offense, but that doesn't do you any good when the first play of the game, you give them a gift pick 6 that they run right back down your throat, and then they just kick field goals the rest of the game, and your offense can't do anything because Spencer Rattler's laying on his back the whole time, getting smothered by Orange. So that explains that. But moving forward, we've got a chance we're excited. They've put in a lot of work. This is one of the strongest teams coming back as far as hitting the weight room, hitting the weights, being dedicated in the off season. A lot of these kids, they've been doing a lot of work on their own without the coaches. We got a guy named Desmond Umeozulu who plays edge. He is blazing fast, 6'6", 260. And I mean, he is just a lightning bolt out there at edge. He's tall, he's long, he's quick. He could be a big playmaker for us. Luke Doty, who played quarterback for us, is now a wide receiver. He's listed as an athlete. He's 6'1", 218, but that's a guy that they can bring in, and you don't know what they're going to do with him. Could they run a wildcat with him? They could throw a toss to him and let him pass. So he could present, some wrinkles to you. Nick Eamon is a defensive back, 6'3", 220. He's quick. Nick Harbor, here he is. He's 6'5", 235. And I think he ran the 40-yard dash in negative time. They actually had to negative time him. He ran it in like negative 0.1 second. No, I'm just kidding, obviously. But Nick Harbor, 6'5", 235. He's extremely, extremely fast. And he's such a threat with the football in his presence. So anyway, that's our positives. Defense and a couple of the offensive ball handling positions, quarterback, wide receiver, where we look the best. If it comes down to smash mouth football against some of these better opponents, and they come running right up the gut, and they come sending the defensive line and tackles and ends and linebackers right up the gut, South Carolina is probably going to run into problems there. And if we have any substantial injuries on the offensive line, it could be a long year in Columbia. Having said that, the goal of this team this year is not, I wouldn't say, well, their goal as a team is obviously championships. I think our goal is, as fans, our expectations are, hey, let's get to some sort of decent bowl game. If you promised the Gamecock faithful right now that you're going to go 7-5, I think everybody that wears garnet and black would gladly take that. I would take 7-5 right now, and we're about to go through this schedule, and I'm going to tell you why that is. Because Saturday, August 31st, at home in Columbia, 4:00 game, Old Dominion.
Yep.
If we can't come out against Old Dominion, and again, not to impugn anyone, but if we can't come out and kind of have our way with Old Dominion, and if we can't get a lot of guys, right, yeah, if we can't get a lot of guys playing time, and if we can't work on some wrinkles there, if we've got to struggle to win that game, then our problems are bigger than we thought, and we may need to actually change our expectations. So I'm going to give Old Dominion off the bat a win. Right after that, things get extremely interesting for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, when I looked at the schedule, I thought, oh, at Kentucky, second game. That'll be interesting.
It is. It is going to be interesting. Kentucky was one of those teams that we had their number forever. And actually, a lot of people in the SEC had their number forever. The deal with Kentucky was they always had people at their football games until early October, and then for some reason they disappeared, and it's because they all went inside to start watching basketball. Right. That's changed in the past few years, and Kentucky's not what you would consider a top tier SEC team, but they're certainly not a push around anymore. Stoops has built them into something to actually be proud of. I mean, Kentucky football is not a joke. You better take it serious when you go up there and you walk into that stadium in Lexington, Kentucky. You better be ready to play, because Kentucky's going to be ready to play.
I think Missouri beat them Kentucky beat Missouri maybe 3 or 4 years in a row here recently.
Kentucky's beaten South Carolina several years in a row. I think we beat them last year, year before, but I think before that, I think Kentucky had beaten us 4 or 5 years in a row. And it used to be the opposite of that. I mean, Kentucky, South Carolina used to look at Kentucky the same way we looked at Vanderbilt, like, oh, okay, well, that's a win, no big deal. We can do something else that weekend. We don't even have to watch. But that's not the case anymore. The problem with that Kentucky game at Kentucky, September 7th, is the next weekend after that, you got LSU at home.
Right.
So if you go to Kentucky and you drop one to the Wildcats at Kentucky and you come home and you face LSU, I mean, yeah, LSU has lost some players off of last year's team with that outstanding, prolific offense that they had that was just insane. They've lost a good many of those guys, but this is still LSU. They're not going to come into Columbia and just roll over and let you take them. So you could potentially be looking at a 1-2 South Carolina game going into September 21st with the game against Akron at home. And that's not where you want to be, but realistically, that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina's got to steal one of those games. You would like to say, oh, well, hey, maybe we can beat Kentucky at Kentucky and beat LSU at home and start off 3-0. And if that happens, man, it'll be just fantastic. I'm not expecting that to happen, but I would be happy with 2-1 playing Akron Saturday, September 21st is 2-1. I would either take a win at Kentucky or a win against LSU. I would certainly take both, but I don't see both happening. Like I said, worst case scenario, we lose to LSU and Kentucky. Best case scenario, we beat both. What hopefully at least happens is that we win one of them and we come to Ole Miss at 3-1, which
you said it well when you said you're gonna have to beat one of the big boys in the conference, I think, to get to that 7-5 for sure.
Sure. Well, sure. But we're sitting here, right now we're sitting here in my best case scenario. Let's say we're 3-1 with a home loss to LSU. Okay. Well, that's great. But now all you've got to do
now you've got a gauntlet.
Yeah. Now you got 3 weekends in a row and you got Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Great. That sounds like a lot of fun. Oh, and you get to go to Tuscaloosa and to Norman.
Yeah.
So, that shouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, we should be able to go to Tuscaloosa and then turn around and go to Norman. So it's tough there. Not to mention Ole Miss at home. I mean, Ole Miss has been rising up here. That's one of the teams that's kind of out there as a dark horse with Lane Kiffin. What are those guys going to do? Is Lane going to take Ole Miss to the promised land? A lot of people say he might just do it. Now that Alabama's got a new coach and Saban's gone, Ole Miss might take control over what was once the West. There is no more SEC East and West. Now it's all just the SEC. But in that old setup of the SEC West this year, you would probably be looking at Ole Miss as a favorite to win the West and go to Atlanta with the losses that LSU's had, with Alabama having a new coach, with Oklahoma being an unknown. Oklahoma, I say being an unknown because they started off pretty bad that first year under Venables. They've gotten better, but what's Oklahoma going to be this year? We don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here because now I'm talking about Ole Miss versus the SEC. But so we got that gauntlet there: Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Now, who can South Carolina beat there? I don't see them honestly beating Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and I don't see them beating Oklahoma and Norman.
If that Bama game was at home, I guess it would be a possibility. But yeah, I don't like it on the road.
It would be a bit more of a possibility, but still, just because Saban is gone from Alabama, don't think that Bama's gone. Bama's not gone. Saban's still there. He may not be playing the part that he was for the past several years, but he's still there. His influence is still there and still felt, and Bama is still going to be good. Bama's not going to turn into Vanderbilt overnight. So we got South Carolina now coming off the win against Akron, sitting there at, what do we say? I've lost myself now.
You had them at 2-1.
2-1. So 3-1.
That's how I have them too.
I got them.
I have them losing to LSU.
I got them 3-1 going into Ole Miss. For whatever reason, I don't know why, I'm going to give South Carolina the Ole Miss win at home. I think they can do it. They've had some history in the past with Ole Miss, and we've beaten them there, and we've beaten them here. Everybody has heard Sandstorm. That was actually the birth of Sandstorm with South Carolina versus Ole Miss several years ago. That's where that started. So I'm going to give them, what's that now, 5-1 there going to Alabama, right?
That'd be 4-1.
After beating Ole Miss.
Yep.
Yeah, 4-1 after beating Ole Miss. And I'm going to give them the next 3 losses. I don't see it. I don't see them beating Bama. I don't see them beating Oklahoma, and I don't see them beating Texas A&M. I don't see it. It would be nice to get one of those. The most likely choice there is Texas A&M.
Yeah.
But that's a team that historically we've had trouble with. We've only beaten them once since we've been in the SEC. If Texas A&M starts off hot and gets rolling, then you got a tough battle there for the Gamecocks. So, Vanderbilt, I think we'll take care of Vanderbilt in Nashville, even though the distance between South Carolina and Vanderbilt is not as far as it once was, but it's still pretty far. We should take care of Vanderbilt. Missouri in Columbia. I think, and I could be very wrong. I think that this is the year we finally get Drinkwitz, and I think that's the game that gets us to a bowl game.
Okay.
And Wofford's going to be a win, and I think Clemson's going to be a loss. So
I was going to say I've got them beating Old Dominion. Well, the non-con is pretty easy, to be honest. You got Old Dominion, Akron, and Wofford. So you got 3 wins there.
You got Old Dominion, Akron, Wofford, and Clemson.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
So, yeah.
4 of them.
Yeah. 3 wins.
So other than Clemson, I got those 3 wins, and then I got a win against Kentucky, Vandy. Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah. So at 5-7. So I think get the Clemson win maybe, or the Missouri win, or other than that, I think it's either Clemson or Missouri get one of those wins to make a bowl game. But
for whatever reason, and it may blow up completely in my face, I'm going to give them Ole Miss and Missouri in 7-5.
All right,
and that is extremely optimistic. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, hey, these are going to be easy games, and we should go 9-3, because I don't see 9-3 being possible. If South Carolina goes 9-3, not only will it be a shock to the country, it would be a shock to us as Gamecock fans. 5-7, I'm not even 100% certain that I would say that I would be extremely disappointed with 5-7. I would be disappointed, but not extremely disappointed. 6-6, I wouldn't be there again to kind of play with my own words. 6-6, I wouldn't be overly happy with, but I would be content with 6-6, because then I could say, okay, we improved from last year. We get to go to a bowl game. We get extra practices. We're moving in the right direction. 7-5 or anything better, I would be happy. I'm not going to say absolutely ecstatic, but I would definitely be happy with 7-5, and anything better than 7-5. It's Mardi Gras. It's just a party after that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's tough. You look at the schedule top to bottom, and I'm sure there's tougher schedules out there in the country, but I mean, just that run right there: Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M. I mean, that's 4 hard ones in a row right there. And God forbid you don't lose a couple of offensive linemen along the way, because if you lose a couple of starting offensive linemen along the way, this could quickly turn into a 4-8 or 3-9 season.
Yeah.
And that just is what it is, where we're at right now.
And I would be comfortable saying that 4-game stretch of Ole Miss, Bama, OU, and A&M might be the toughest 4-game stretch that anyone in the country is going to play this year. We'd have to look it up, but that's 4 top 10-ish teams all in a row.
Yeah, that's pretty strong. And and you factor in there your other games are LSU and Clemson,
Right.
Missouri. I mean, Missouri's a what? I mean, they're right at a top 10 team, number 11. They're
Hmm.
coming off what, a 10 win season, 11 win season, whatever, 10 win. So I mean, it's tough. It's all the way around. It's tough. And luckily we got that non-con there with those three kind of gimmies. You hope to God you win all three of those. I mean, believe me, hey, I've sat there in that stadium with 80,000 before and watched the Citadel beat them. So I mean,
Yeah.
anything's possible from one day to the next, but it's going to be a tough year for the Gamecocks. This isn't a fortuitous schedule for trying to kind of build. This is going to be a big ask for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks.
Yeah. And I agree with you that Missouri game is probably winnable just because of Eli Drinkwitz. I don't think the guy is a great coach. He's a great recruiter. He's got them talented, that's for sure. So
Well,
anytime you play Missouri, I think there's a chance if you have any kind of talent on your team. And I mean, you describing the quarterback and receiver, that's a weapon right there. So
yes,
you have weapons on offense. Yeah, I could
because
see that definitely.
Columbia, South Carolina benefits the Gamecocks there a lot more than Columbia, Missouri. I mean, for whatever reason, Como is like a black hole where as soon as we get there, it's like all life is instantly sucked out of us and we can't play. I don't know what it is about Como, but we
Mm.
Gamecocks can't play in Como, and I don't know why.
Huh.
So hopefully we can get them in Columbia, South Carolina, because we sure can't do anything in Columbia, Missouri. But yeah, that quarterback wide receiver combination, if we can just get him some minimal amount of protection, and if we can keep Lenora Sellers healthy with as big and strong as fast as he is, I mean, if he can get that thing out there, and you got Nichols Harbor out there burning down the sideline, like I was talking earlier, if you can drop one in there from 50 or 60 yards and burn somebody and 6 points in 6 seconds, I mean that covers a lot of deficit pretty quickly.
And what's your take on Clemson? Because I know they got in trouble for some recruiting violations in the last, say, 5 years, handful of years, and their recruiting has really dipped. I don't know if that's because of that, of getting in trouble with that, and they just kind
For
of laid
whatever
off for a while, but they're not up there in the recruiting rankings anymore, and they've suffered on the field because of it. So I don't know if they're on a downturn or if this is a bump in the road, or what's your take on that?
for whatever reason, Dabo Sweeney is I mean 100% anti NIL or anything to do with
Okay,
it.
well,
He's
yeah,
just
that would affect it.
so and he's been anti NIL, and he's not going to change his mind. And I don't think that in today's world, where you've got 100 and something other teams that are playing the NIL market, and using that to their advantage, and you're not, you're just, you're gonna stand on your hill, you're gonna die on your hill of not being an NIL team. I don't think that's going to work out very good for Clemson.
No.
Clemson, by virtue, and this is a stance that I've maintained for a while, and I will always maintain this stance for the foreseeable future, at least until something changes. But by virtue of their schedule, Clemson should win 8 games every year, blindfolded.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally should. I mean, you should be able to go against Duke and Wake Forest, blindfolded. Now, some of those ACC teams are coming up, and they're getting better, and the ACC is obviously changing with the conference realignment and those things. So it's not the ACC of old, but for years and years, the only thing the ACC had to throw at the football world was Clemson, and then they got Florida State in. And then they got Virginia Tech in. But back in the old days, before those teams were part of the ACC, I mean, it was Clemson's every year. I mean, Clemson, that was Clemson just basically just dressed and showed up and had
Yeah.
7 or 8 wins off the bat. So it's not that way anymore. And with Dabo
Well,
refusing
they
to,
used to have top 5 recruiting classes, and that's not happening now.
no, well, it's not, because if I'm living right there, say on the Georgia South Carolina line, and I can go to Georgia or I can go to Clemson, and hey, look, if I go to Georgia, I get
I get
steak
$1 million
dinner.
and
Yeah, I get a steak dinner if I go to Georgia, and I get a chicken sandwich if I go to Clemson. I mean,
yeah.
I'm going to go to Georgia, so I think that's kind of what's hurting Clemson there, is not wanting to play that game, not being a part of that game. Clemson, given the right coach, could easily be a 9, 10, 11 win team yearly. But for whatever reason, Dabo isn't getting on board with it, and I think that's what's happening there. And we'll have to see. They're supposed to be taking an upswing. Talk around these parts is that this is supposed to be a different, much improved Clemson team this year. So we'll see if we get a 10-win Clemson team. Then it kind of rights the ship, and everything's going back in the right direction. But if you see Clemson drop off or start to slip anymore, if they start to slip down and say, 8-4 or 7-5, and no mention of the ACC championship, things may start to get a little bit dicey in the upstate of South Carolina. So, that's kind of where things are right now. We'll just have to wait and see.
All right. So I've got South Carolina at 5-7, and you have them at 7-5, and I can see 7-5. So we're in the
And
same ballpark.
there's a good chance it'll be 6-6. So
Yeah. Right.
we'll split that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Them stealing one of those would not surprise me at all.
No.
Oh, yeah.
My college football playoff hopes this year lie with the Cats.
All right.
With the purple and silver. So don't let me down. If we can't get the Cats there, then I don't have anything. So
yep.
Cats and Cocks.
That's right, brother. All right, man. Anything else?
No, exciting so far. This, with that Florida State Georgia Tech game, really enjoyed that. Got 2 off days this year, 2 off weekends for everybody, right? Doesn't everybody have 2 open weekends?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess that happens every few years. Looking forward to that. And I'm a couple games out there I'm really looking forward to this year. For whatever reason, I really want to see, and obviously I'm referring to TV, but I really looking forward to that K-State BYU game. I love that scenery from Utah. I think it's one of the most beautiful states out there. It is pretty. It's gorgeous to look at. I'm excited to see how some of these Arizona teams do in the Big 12. I think that's a really good addition for the Big 12, is the Arizona teams. I think that those 2 Arizona teams are going to make the biggest difference in the Big 12 in the long run. Curious to see, obviously, about Texas and Oklahoma. And I sincerely hope with all of my being that we do not see a Texas versus Oklahoma SEC championship.
Oh, that would suck.
God, you're telling me anytime soon. I know. I mean, eventually it's probably going to happen, just because they're both good, and they're probably both going to continue to be good. I'm looking for some big surprises this year in the SEC, and I say that because who I'm referencing there is Texas and Oklahoma. And I'm not saying, Texas and Oklahoma are about to get spanked by the SEC, but I'm going to make a bold prediction. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think that you're going to see either Texas or Oklahoma, one, take a very surprising loss by an SEC team that no one would expect them to lose to. And I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to say who it is. I've got it in my mind.
I totally agree with that.
I think I believe 100% you will see Texas or Oklahoma take a loss by an SEC team that they have no business losing to. It'll be a field storming, goalpost ripping down. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be crazy, but I think we're going to see it happen. So just tune in every Saturday or whatever day they're playing, and wait for the mayhem.
It wouldn't surprise me if OU is 6-6. I mean, I'll just say that.
I remember, hey, a couple of years ago when I was when I posted on Twitter, and I wish I had kept it. I delete almost everything, but I told those guys at the beginning of that year, Venables year, I said, Oklahoma may not make a bowl game this year. And I think you and I think even like our friend Ozzy, I think everybody kind of, laughed and kind of was shocked that I made such an outlandish statement. But, lo and behold, it came to pass, because Venables struggled that
Yeah.
first year.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see, if Venables now,
I
I
think he's
think
going to continue to struggle.
I think he's going to continue to struggle, but I tell you one thing that I think is going to help him. I think it's going to help him a lot more being in the SEC than being in the Big 12. And the reason I say that isn't because of the competition that he's going to be facing. It has nothing to do with the competition he's going to be facing. I think that he's a lot more secure, a lot more knowledgeable recruiting east of the Mississippi. From the Mississippi to the Atlantic than he is out west. And I think that what you're going to see now that he's going
That's
to
a
be
good
more
point.
immersed in the SEC footprint is it's going to be a little bit easier for him to recruit and get the guys that he wants. He's a defensive, that's what he is. He knows defense, and he knows these schools around these parts, around South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee. He knows where to go and find players, and it's tough to get those players to come to Oklahoma when they're going to be playing Kansas or Oklahoma State or whoever every weekend. You're trying to get these kids that from this part of the country to go out west and play football. Well, now you're trying to get those kids from this part of the country, yes, to still kind of go out to west, Midwest, etc., to Oklahoma, but they're coming back to play in places like Nashville or Baton Rouge or Columbia, South Carolina, or Athens, Georgia, etc. They're coming back to play where their friends and family can see them. So I think that actually may be a recruiting draw for Venables. So I think you'll see Oklahoma start to take a step up for that reason.
Yeah, real good point. I agree with you there.
But I still won't be pulling for them, nor will I be pulling for Kansas, nor will I be pulling for Clemson or Georgia. So
Yeah,
that's
either.
or Texas.
I'm sick of Georgia, but they're going to be good again. So
I've come to realize that I spend a lot more time pulling against teams than I do pulling for. So my against
that's
list
me in
is
basketball with KU.
Yeah,
everyone that plays them, I'm a fan of.
Exactly. Yeah, my against list is getting longer, and my for list is getting shorter. So
right.
maybe I need to start being a little bit more positive.
Yeah, that's all right, man. Well, Monty, this is fun, man.
Absolutely.
I think we're rolling pretty good. So
we'll have plenty to talk about a week from now. I'm looking forward to next Saturday because really this Saturday past was just kind of a little tune up. We had that Florida State Georgia Tech game, which was interesting. Next Saturday, there's going to be a few good games next Saturday, but by and large, there's going to be a lot of crap games next Saturday. Let's just call it what it is. There's going to be a lot of crap games because nobody wants to start off the season with a real game. 2 weeks from now, that's when we're going to start to see what's really happening. That's going to be the fun weekend. That September 7th weekend. That's going to be when we're really going to start to see some fireworks and some action popping off on that Saturday, September 7th. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. Can't wait, man. I'm excited.
Looking forward to it, brother. Looking forward to talking to you next week.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right, my man. Have a good one. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.